Hello, welcome to Exploring Sunday Scriptures for this week. It is Tuesday, April the 22nd. These are the scriptures associated with this coming Sunday, April the 27th, which is the second Sunday of the season of Easter, the first Sunday of the season being Resurrection Sunday. So Easter is a season that extends from Resurrection Sunday to Ascension Day, and then we transition to Pentecost. Also, itself a length of 40 days, with Pentecost then being 50 days after the celebration of Easter. One of the differences is Protestant expressions of Christianity don't often maintain Ascension as a perfect 40 days, as that would then place it not on a Sunday. So Ascension Sunday often gets pushed to that Sunday just prior to Pentecost, so only 7 days before Pentecost. Nonetheless, it's a season of Easter, and so we have the colors of Easter represented within the sanctuary, the continued presence of those flowers that were left unclaimed following Resurrection Sunday, and the paraments themselves remain in the expression or color of joy, which is the color of white, which is used as a symbolic color of the presence of God and resurrection and joy and celebration. And for us at Christ Church, our paraments also include on the white other colors that are kind of in the rainbow, in those pastel tones of this season of spring, as well as the season of resurrection. So rainbow also can be something that is employed at this time. Now, I've decided up to our 75th anniversary to kind of stick with the resurrection. And the season of Easter really does tend to generally highlight those episodes and moments of Jesus, of the encounters with the risen Christ in the lives of the disciples. Now, interestingly, this Sunday, I'm actually returning to a narrative that really looks like Resurrection Sunday, that looks like the narrative that we heard out of Luke's Gospel last week. So I wanted to really kind of take some time for us to appreciate, to live with these resurrection moments longer than like, okay, there was Resurrection Sunday, let's move along. And so we're coming back and we're revisiting the same very episode of Resurrection Sunday from a different gospel. And so it provides a different viewpoint. We can see kind of what Luke borrowed, or the material that was the same from both of these gospel writers, and one of the differences. Now, this is coming to us from Mark, and what's interesting about Mark's gospel is the oldest versions of the Bible that we have end where this reading for this week also is going to end. And it's a very abrupt ending. It leaves us not in the sense of then having further appearances of Jesus, but ending with the terrified women running away from the tomb. And that's where Mark concludes it, which is a very curious kind of ending for us to deal with from these oldest manuscripts. Was something lost, or is this really how Mark concluded the story of Jesus and Jesus's life? And that's part of the reason that I really wanted to spend some time with this, to explore this with all of you, is how do we deal with this if this was the earliest gospel? Most scholars think this was the earliest written account of the life of Jesus. So the first time it was written down was Mark's gospel, and it ended here originally. Then what do we do with that? What do we do with this story and this abrupt ending when we're used to kind of John's version and Luke and Matthew, which have more that follows? And so to live with this a little longer. Now, some of the things that you might remember from last week, and I certainly want you to kind of have in the back of your mind, is that in Luke's version, there isn't a lot of emphasis placed on the stone, on the placement of the stone, or the difficulty that it'll be to move the stone. There is no emphasis on the grave clothes set aside at all. That is something we pick up in other Gospels. But in Luke's version, there really isn't mention of them at all. And really the focus that we have in Luke is these two figures that appear to the women. So these two figures in dazzling white, which may be a particular flourish of Luke, as he uses two figures in other places, as I alluded to on Sunday, in Transfiguration, in Ascension, as well as in the visitation to Mary. It's a single figure, but the visitation to Mary is very similar to this encounter with these two that we had from Luke on Resurrection Sunday. And then those figures sort of guiding the experience or the sense of what should be remembered, what should be thought of by the women. And so let's bear in mind sort of the uniqueness of Luke as we now encounter that same reality in Mark, as that can really give us a sense of what's the same and what's different, what's unique, and how does that fill out our picture more? Not how does it make us doubt perhaps the validity of Luke's version versus Mark's, but how does this create a different picture? When we share memories of a loved one, it's interesting as we meet with family and share those memories, everybody's memory adds to and provides a fuller picture of that person or to a moment captured in time. And I feel like each of the resurrection accounts does the same. We have a little bit that is added to and added to and added to that gives us a full picture or a color picture rather than just a black and white or a sepia tone. So with each one that we encounter, we get a little bigger picture, a little fuller picture, a little more colorful picture of everything that's going on. As always, I encourage you to go ahead and pause this video if you want. And in pausing this video, to give a little bit of time to appreciate the context of what's happening uniquely in your life, but also that's happening around us in our neighborhoods, in our city, in our region, in our nation, in our world. All of those things we bring with us to worship. And so it's good to give a little bit of attention to what is it that we are bringing with us. What are the conditions around us in our lives that we are bringing with us as we are looking to have an encounter with God, as we are struggling perhaps with where God is in the midst of this, as we are awaiting maybe test results or something else. And so to really think about those things influences which words impact us when we experience God's inspired word, when we encounter scripture, which ones maybe just kind of go over our head, or how these passages that we've heard before hit us differently each time we encounter them. And that's based on those contextual realities, as much as each of our scripture readings has their own unique context of time and place and people. So as we encounter it, we have our unique context of time, place, and people. So as I said, this is the narrative of the resurrection as it comes to us from the Gospel of Mark. It's the 16th chapter. It's just 8 verses. This is the only passage that we will have on this first Sunday of resurrection as we live with these passages through to our 75th anniversary celebration on May 18th. So this is the New Revised Standard Version. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Salome, bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to one another, "Who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, "Do not be alarmed, for you are looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter that he's going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were terrified. So I'm eventually going to get to that last verse, which, as I said, this is in the oldest manuscripts, the end of Mark's gospel is, they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And we can tease out all of the things that are there. So what are some of the things that we may have heard that obviously resonate from one episode to another, from one encounter of the resurrection to another? Number one, that the morning of resurrection is following the conclusion of the Sabbath day, that the body of Jesus was not fully prepared for burial because the Sabbath was upon them and there was a need to honor the religious rituals and rhythms. And so after the Sabbath was over, so they were going to complete what was part of their customs. And we had others listed in Luke. Mary Magdalene is in both, so a very important figure. And we have Mary, the mother of James and Salome. I believe in Luke's version, I don't have that passage right next to me, we had Mary, the mother of James, and it's not Salome used there, it's a different name, but probably the same person being spoken of. And it says they bought spices. Doesn't tell us how much. I believe Luke's version told us how much of the spices were bought. Here it just says spices, that they might go and anoint him, so that they might go and prepare the body. So that's what's intended here. We don't know when they bought the spices. We don't know if the spices were bought before the Sabbath. We don't know if the spices were bought that morning. That information is not given. We don't have the quantity. We don't have the cost. But in other versions, we have those things also, in addition to simply the presence of the spices themselves. And we have the purpose of those spices further illuminated in other passages. I often say to people, the Gospel of Mark is sort of the Cliff's Notes version of the life of Jesus. It's brief, it's thin on details, it cuts right to the basics and then moves us along. So it's perhaps not a surprise that we don't have the cost associated, the weight associated, and the purpose. It's kind of all there in the background without explicitly stating it. So, Sabbath concluded very early the first day of the week. So this is what we would think of as Sunday, as the Sabbath day was typically Saturday. They get up at first light. They go at first light. That was when it would be permissible by their religious observances to go to resume the normal activities of life. So they are going at first light to do what would be customary in connection with preparation of the body. So the sun's risen. And here we get something that's absent from Luke's version last week. As they were going, their conversation is, how are we going to get in? That's essentially what is happening when they talk about the stone and who's going to roll it away. A large stone, and they're all looking at each other going, we don't have the physical strength, or we don't have the enough people to begin to move this thing so that we can get in there and do what we want to do. It didn't stop them from advancing to the tomb. They are saying this as they go, like, how are we going to get in? And then as they get there, they see that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. They go into the tomb. So this is some of the differences that we have is going in, remaining in, where people appear. So it's kind of a curiosity to have something different. Is the encounter in the garden? Is the encounter in the tomb? In Mark's version, the encounter with the figure, and it's a singular figure, is in the tomb. So they go in the tomb. They see the stone rolled away. Think of them going, oh no, what's happened? And they enter the tomb, but they're also going because they have this preparation they wish to do with the body. As they enter, they see a young man dressed in a white robe. So we're back to that white robe. Now, Luke uses a lot of descriptors in association with that white robe. Dazzling, like lightning, sparkling, depends on the translation, but really emphasizes just how white it was, that this figure is unique. This just says white robe. But again, Mark is thin on details, but it's kind of there in the background. The intention is to really express the uniqueness of the individual. And white is a very hard color, particularly in the ancient world, to really make vibrantly white. So even just saying white is really emphasizing something here without saying more to it. The young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were amazed. So they go in the tomb and they see this one sitting on the right side. Now, in these tombs hewn in rock, there would have been shelving that they would have placed bodies on. So my view, or the way that I typically see this, is as this individual is sitting on one of those shelves on the right side. And that may have been the very place, or at least my imagination has him sitting in the very place where the body would have been laid. So they see this person, they go in, they go, oh no, how are we going to get in? It's already open. That's a surprise to them. They go in, there's an individual there. That's alarming to them. And he says, don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus of Nazareth who is crucified. So it's expressing that this person has the knowledge of who it is that they are there to seek out. He's been raised. He's not here. That's it. That's all that's said. He's been raised. He's not here. And then we have sort of observation. Look, there is the place they laid him. Now, again, I picture him sitting sort of on the shelf that Jesus was laid on and sort of saying, why don't you look right here? You can see he's not here. Now, Mark is another version where we don't have anything mentioned about the grave clothes. In John's version, we do, but here, no mention of the cloth that's used or shrouding the body. Look at where they laid him. He's not there. And then we have instructions. Go, tell the disciples and Peter that he's going ahead of you to Galilee. Now, that's similar to Luke's version. He told you he would go on ahead. Now, this is more, you tell them that he is going ahead. Luke's version was, remember how he told you he would go ahead of you. A little different, but both kind of similarly saying that Jesus is going to be encountered down the road, back in Galilee. And it's there down the road that you're going to see him, just as he told you. Now, there's that little bit that kind of is like Luke's in saying, remember, just as he told you. But there is instruction here. You go and tell that he is going ahead of you. Remember, he told you that. And they flee the tomb, and this is the last line that we have. For terror and amazement had seized them. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And this is what we have to sit with, is what were they afraid of? They were so afraid that they did not tell the disciples. They did not tell Peter. At least that's the implication that is here. They said nothing to anyone. Terror, amazement had seized them. Was it because they believed they wouldn't themselves be believed? Was it that they were afraid for their lives? Was it that they were struggling to understand what was said? There's so many different things that we can kind of plumb into in this last little line. And maybe for us also shapes our own individual responses to the resurrection, is how willing are we to share this experience? Or do we really leave it at the tomb and in the tomb? And that's kind of the direction, at least I'm exploring, is they go and they're experiencing something new, and it does change them, but there is still a reluctance or a failure to appreciate what that really means to then share it more broadly. And so how is this encouraging us to not hold back from our sharing of what is happening, but to roll away whatever is impairing us to share that, and to encourage that sense that as we go about our lives, we'll continue to encounter Christ. So it's taking our resurrection message from last week and kind of further developing that same idea that this is now something that we move into life to continue to experience. So, as I said, only a single scripture this week, only this single passage from Mark. I encourage you to go back, Mark 16, verses 1 through 8. Read it a few more times. Think about it. Think about how it's sitting with you. Think about what you would sing in conjunction with this, in connection with this, what else you would say, what else is really connecting to you in this passage. But we're going to be exploring these moments of resurrection until we get to that 75th anniversary. So we're going to live in this season of Easter perhaps a little more fully by really kind of living with these things. I appreciate, as always, the opportunity to explore Sunday scriptures with you, and we'll be back next week to explore them again. If you've never participated in Feasting on the Word, it's a short 10-minute devotion. It's a way of spending time with a small piece of scripture and really kind of having an opportunity through hearing that same scripture multiple times to live with it more fully. And I'm going to be using the scriptures associated with this series that I'm developing through this season because it is largely just a single passage. So I'm going to use Mark 16, 1 through 8. use 4 different translations of the same passage. That comes out tomorrow, Feasting on the Word. And that may be a great way to encounter this same passage again and to spend more time with it, to continue to reflect on it, as that will also be in the coming weeks what I'm going to do with some of the scriptures. So if you've never done it before, now's a great time to add it in as a discipline, about 10 minutes a time, to live with those passages, God's inspired word, a little more. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back next week as we continue our explorations of the resurrection. God bless you.